Heya Cryptozens, welcome back to the Crypto Overnighter. My name is Nikodemus and we do crypto news analysis nightly at 10 p.m. And keep in mind, none of this should be considered financial advice. And welcome to Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. I've had a pretty good day so far. I don't know about you. So I think we're going to start some things off with some good news today. I know, right? And this has to do with the SEC versus LBRY. Now, LBRY is a decentralized content sharing and publishing platform. Well, as a part of the fight against the SEC back in November, the court sided with the Securities Exchange Commission, asserting the LBC token was a security. This granted the SEC's request for a summary judgment. The government argued that the defendants had raised over $11 million in the form of crypto and cash investments between 2016 to 2021. They said the sale of those tokens represented an investment token, and that's why it was a security. On the other side, LBRY said the LBC token couldn't be a security because they had millions of users before any tokens were issued. They also noted that they didn't have an ICO, which is a sticking point. And as I said at the time, this is really bad because it set precedent. They had a judge on the record saying that the LBC token was an unregistered security. Well, that's precedent, and that's not the kind of precedent that we wanted set. Well, we have news. A New Hampshire district court judge has drawn a box around that a little bit. The SEC asked for a clarification on the ruling. And funny thing, surprise, surprise, the judge said that the injunction only applied to the direct sales of the tokens. A guy by the name of John Deaton participated in the case as an amicus curiae. He pulled out a paper written by another lawyer by the name of Lewis Cohen. This paper evaluated every security lawsuit in the United States since the creation of the Howey test. Apparently, no court has ever acknowledged an underlying asset as a security. That must have done the trick, because the judge replied saying, quote, "Amicus, I'm going to make it clear my order does not apply to secondary market sales." And while people are considering what that means, I'll be thinking about how this impacts the case between the SEC and Ripple. Stablecoin licensing could be coming to Hong Kong, and algorithmic stablecoins like Terra USD need not apply. So Hong Kong is planning on setting mandatory licensing for stablecoin issuers. And according to their top regulator, algorithmic stablecoins are just dead on arrival. Everyone else will be able to conduct business in Hong Kong. They just have to get a stablecoin license first. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority put out their regulatory plans after incorporating feedback from a discussion paper that it published last year. The regulator said that they received 58 responses. And based on those responses, they're setting up a stablecoin supervision regime. Now, first off, the HKMA plans to keep a watchful eye on the governance, stabilization, and issuance of stablecoins. And when I say stablecoins, I'm just talking about the fiat-backed stables. Now, if you want to start issuing stablecoins, first off, you have to have 100% matching reserves, dollar for dollar, won for won, the amount of stables in circulation. This follows similar legislation in the works in the EU, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulations. It lines up with Japan's rules, and it would work with some proposals for governing stablecoins in the U.S. The report said, quote, "The value of the reserve assets of a stablecoin arrangement should meet the value of the outstanding stablecoins at all times. The reserve assets should be high quality and high liquidity. Stablecoins that derive their value based on arbitrage or algorithm will not be accepted." And that's a reasonable response to the collapse of the Terra Luna ecosystem, which can largely be traced to the failure of their algorithmic stablecoin to maintain its peg. In fact, it could be argued that much of our crypto winter was kicked off by the collapse of Terra USD and everything built upon it. Eddie Yu is the Monetary Authority's chief executive. He said, quote, "In drawing up the specific regulatory arrangements, the HKMA will consider the feedback received, latest market development, and international discussion. We will also engage with stakeholders and market participants. We expect to implement the regulatory arrangements in 2023-24. Now, staying on the subject of stablecoins here, a new partnership was announced. Pound Token and Bitcoin Point have embarked on a partnership. This partnership aims to put out Britain's first 100% backed British pound, the GBPT, via ATMs. They're targeting a network of 18,000 ATMs across the country to issue the stablecoin. Now, BitPoint is the exchange. They're a Lightning-enabled Bitcoin network as well as an exchange that's licensed and registered to work in the UK. Pound Token is the sole producer of GBPT. Pound Token claims that their stablecoin is 100% backed by fiat currency. KPMG is providing monthly attestations. Now, you can already buy Bitcoin and Ethereum via ATMs throughout the UK. Adding GBPT to the mix means consumers can use the stablecoin for payments while using a denomination that's familiar to most Brits. It also seems to me a good way to get more Britons involved in Web3 and other crypto-related services. A group of U.S. senators wrote a letter to Silvergate Capital asking for information about FTX's collapse. They say Silvergate didn't fully answer their previous questions about handling user funds. Silvergate claimed it couldn't share information due to confidentiality, but the senators don't accept that. The senators wrote a letter saying that they need more information to understand Silvergate's involvement in FTX's collapse. They say Silvergate used the Federal Home Loan Bank as a lender, so it's important to know what happened. They asked Silvergate for answers in a previous letter, but say the firm didn't give all the important information needed to understand its role in the FTX situation, including if it handled user assets correctly. So what happened is, after FTX's collapse, Senators Warren and Whitehouse asked the Justice Department to take a look at what happened with FTX. They asked the DOJ to consider charging folks. So in their letter, they gave Silvergate until February 13th to respond back, including reporting on their due diligence practices. Shares of Silvergate were up 4% in early trading on Tuesday, which sounds great until you realize they're down 88% over the last year. Speaking of FTX, shockwaves from the exchange's collapse are still being felt as far off as Kazakhstan. Now what's happening is Kazakhstan's crypto regulator is proposing new requirements for digital asset exchanges, and these changes include the segregation of customer assets and risk mitigation. They're looking to the example of FTX's poor governance as their reasoning. The Astana Financial Services Authority, or AFSA, put out their draft enhancements to the Digital Asset Trading Facility crypto exchange licensing framework. They were submitted for public comment on Monday. This was after AFSA said their existing rules landscape had revealed, quote, contradictions, inefficient provisions, and uncertain definitions. And make no mistake, their focus is on FTX's failure, especially new regulations on segregating customers' funds. The tangled financials between FTX and Alameda won't be allowed under Kazakhstan's new rules. AFSA's proposed changes also addressed liquidity risk, proper disclosure, and risk of arbitrage. And things have really picked up crypto-wise for Kazakhstan. After China put the kibosh on crypto, Kazakhstan took over the second slot as far as Bitcoin hash rate production goes. It got so bad they had to redo the electricity rules to accommodate the influx of new miners. Binance is also involved. They're licensed to serve customers in Kazakhstan, and they've been working with their Astana IT park. They want to, quote, integrate banking infrastructure within the cryptocurrency market. Now, their existing rules say that AFSA has to approve crypto assets before they're allowed to be traded on licensed exchanges. The new rules suggest a criteria-based process. They're adding a green list of approved tokens to that process. In conclusion, they said, quote, overall, the regulatory framework is at the early stages of development, and there is a need to observe how all the measures of the DATF framework will work in practice. It appears Celsius Network was the very definition of a Ponzi scheme, because in addition to misleading investors, Celsius has been known to use the customer funds from new customers to pay for other customers' withdrawals. Literal exit liquidity. Now, this all comes to light in the form of testimony from an independent examiner in their bankruptcy trial. We reported it back in September, when Shoba Pillay was tasked by the U.S. Bankruptcy Court with investigating the goings-on at Celsius. Well, now they've published their findings, providing an account of what happened in the months up to the bankruptcy last July. Pillay interviewed a number of staffers, to include former CEO Alex Mashinsky, by the way, not only staffers, but vendors and customers as well. She wrote, quote, "In every respect, from how Celsius described its contract with its customers to the risks it took with their assets, how Celsius ran its business differed significantly from what Celsius told its customers." Now, the problem is, according to Pillay, Celsius was making promises of awe-inspiring financial returns. They claimed to be offering financial freedom, and they weren't very forthcoming with the risks that they faced. And this was no secret, at least not internally. Back in April 2022, Celsius's coin deployment specialist described Celsius's practice as, quote, very Ponzi-like. Now, Pillay said the staff was aware of what was going on, that they knew that there was a discrepancy between the internal mechanics of their Cell token and what they were telling the public. Pillay said, quote, "In some instances, however, between June 9th and June 12th, Celsius did directly use new customer deposits to fund customer withdrawal requests. And that wasn't enough, as we know. They filed for bankruptcy last July, but there were internal signs. Between May and June of last year, Celsius had to unwind borrowing because their returns weren't enough to buy back their Cell token." She said, quote, "Celsius recognized that it should not use customer assets to purchase the coins necessary to cover liabilities to other customers. It justified its use of customer deposits to fill this hole in its balance sheet on the basis that it was not selling customer deposits, but instead posting them as collateral to borrow the necessary coins." Well, that's just silly degenerate gambler talk right there. But you can't really pin all of this on 2022, according to Pillay. She says the problems stem back to 2020. That's when Celsius started using customer money to fund operations and rewards. One manager was quoted by Pillay as saying, "We spent all our cash paying executives trying to prop up Alex's net worth in Cell token." Now, here's what was happening. Mashinsky sold 25 million of those Cell tokens. This was after saying he wasn't going to sell. He sold for at least $68.7 million in the 4 years between 2018 and bankruptcy. And that $68.7 million is after employees were internally talking about how the token's true value was zero. And he's not alone. Apparently, Nuke Goldstein cashed out for $2.8 million, and S. Daniel Leon walked away with $9.74 million. Now, if you remember, Mashinsky always claimed to have 200% collateral. Well, clearly that wasn't true. In fact, according to Pillay, it was pretty far off the mark. Up to 14% of Celsius's institutional loans were wholly unsecured in December of 2020. And it's those unsecured loans, often obfuscated, that got us in the mess we are in today. And that 14%, that was the start. That number was as high as 36% in mid-2021. And even if they did collect collateral, that doesn't mean it was worth anything. They took FTT as collateral. For those that may not remember, FTT is the native token of the FTX exchange. FTX's crash stemmed from the fact that FTX inflated the value of FTT to artificial levels, and then they stated a value based on how much FTT they were holding. Well, none of that was true, but then companies like Celsius accepted it as collateral. Pillay said, quote, "What Celsius and Mr. Mashinsky never did was correct the record after the fact for the thousands of live audience members who heard these misstatements, or for those who watched the recorded videos on YouTube before they were edited." She also cited, quote, "significant tax-compliant deficiencies." She said the mining arm may owe more than $23.1 million in U.S. taxes. They also have a tax bill in the UK of $3.7 million. And that's going to do it for us tonight. I want to thank you, my listeners, because when you stop listening, I will stop talking. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, follow, and subscribe. Anything to help other people find their way to this show. In the meantime, we'll see you tomorrow night.